So Airbnb, many people would say that, or a number of people said it's the worst idea that ever worked. Or at least I can say a lot of everyone at the time seemed to say it was the worst idea ever, and it worked. So maybe that's the nice connection. It's the worst idea that ever worked.
It's 2008 and two broke designers drowning in credit card debt and surviving on instant noodles are clinging to an idea no one believes in. Their startup, a crazy idea about renting air mattresses on their floor, is making a whopping $200 a week. Split three ways, that's not even enough to cover their San Francisco rent. They're hemorrhaging money, and every investor they meet thinks they are insane. One of them literally tells them, "I hope this isn't the only thing you're working on." The end is near. So what do? They pivot to breakfast cereal. Yes, you heard that right. They put their entire failing company on hold to design, produce, and hand glue hundreds of novelty cereal boxes themed around the presidential election. It was a move born of pure desperation, a last-ditch, nonsensical gamble to save a dream that everyone, and I mean everyone, thought was a joke. This wasn't just a quirky side hustle. This was the chaotic, absurd, and frankly ridiculous act that would accidentally save a company now valued at over $100 billion. And to understand how they got to the point of betting it all on cardboard and cheap Cheerios, we first need to understand just how broke and desperate they really were. The story of Airbnb begins, as many chaotic tales do, with the threat of eviction. It's 2007, and our protagonists, Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia, are two art school graduates living in a San Francisco loft. They have big dreams, but their bank accounts are small. A massive design conference is coming to town, and they notice a problem. Every single hotel room is booked solid. Meanwhile, they have their own, more pressing problem. Their landlord just jacked up the rent, and they can't afford it. Staring at the empty space in their apartment, a light bulb goes off. It's a weird, slightly creepy light bulb, but a light bulb nonetheless. What if they could rent out a piece of their floor? They pull out 3 air mattresses, inflate them, and create a makeshift website, Airbed and Breakfast. They offered not just a place to crash, but an experience. They, as local designers, would be the hosts, showing their guests around the city. For $80 a night, 3 people actually took them up on it. 3 strangers slept on their floor, and in the morning, Chesky and Gebbia had the rent money. For most people, this would be a funny one-off story to tell at parties. For them, it was a proof of concept. But when they tried to turn this accidental solution into a real business, they hit a wall. So they launched the site again for another conference. The result? Crickets. They got exactly 2 bookings, and one of them was Brian Chesky himself. The idea of Airbed and Breakfast seemed destined to be just that, a one-hit wonder. They were solving their own rent problem, but it wasn't a business. No one wanted to invest in a glorified air mattress rental service. The rejections started piling up, each one more brutal than the last. But this constant rejection was about to force them into their most creative and most desperate idea yet. By 2008, things were dire. Chesky and Gebbia, now joined by engineer Nathan Blecharczyk, had tried to relaunch their site multiple times with no success. Their business model was a ghost town. They approached 15 different angel investors, hoping to raise $150,000. 7 didn't even bother to reply. The other 8 gave them a hard no. The feedback was brutal, telling them things like, "The market for this is not big enough, and people aren't going to do this."
We ended up meeting a few more investors, and they all passed on us. The low point was we meet with the angel Mike Maples, and we decided, I was so cocky, I said, I'm not even bringing a deck. I'm just going to show him the live website. We launched that day on TechCrunch. We had 10,000 people visit our website. I go there without a deck. I have a website. I type in the website. It doesn't work. So I basically sat in front of him for like an hour, and I didn't know what to say. I'm trying to explain to him this concept, and he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Their financial situation became a ticking time bomb. They were living off credit cards, and not just 1 or 2, but a whole binder full of them. Chesky himself had racked up over $30,000 in personal credit card debt. He later described it as the best weight loss program ever, waking up every morning in a cold sweat.
So this is now almost a year into the business. We're tens of thousands of dollars in credit card debt. Every investor said no to us. We've launched 3 times. We've gotten national press, and we have like almost no customers.
They were in what Silicon Valley calls the trough of sorrow, a deep, dark place where most startups go to die. They needed cash, and they needed it now. The investor doors were all slammed shut, so they looked around for another opportunity. The 2008 Democratic National Convention was approaching in Denver, and Barack Obama was set to give a huge speech. Hotel rooms were scarce. It was their first idea all over again, but they knew it wouldn't be enough. They needed a plan B. That's when the idea struck. It was so far out of left field, it was almost brilliant. As designers, they thought, airbed and breakfast isn't working. What about just the breakfast part? They would capitalize on the election fever. They designed 2 limited edition collectible cereal boxes, Obama O's, the breakfast of change, and Captain McCain's, a maverick in every bite. This wasn't a joke. This was their business plan. They found a cheap printer through a school connection, bought pallets of generic cereal, and spent hours in their apartment hand-folding and hot-gluing hundreds of these boxes together. They sold the cereal for $40 a box. It sounds insane, but people bought it. They pitched it as a collector's item, a piece of political memorabilia. News channels picked up the story of these serial entrepreneurs. In a matter of weeks, they sold over 800 boxes and raked in $30,000. It was just enough to pull them out of the immediate debt spiral. And it wasn't just the cash the cereal gave them. They gave them a story. And that story was about to land them in front of one of the most influential people in Silicon Valley. Desperate for mentorship and a real investment, they applied to Y Combinator, the legendary startup accelerator run by Paul Graham. They actually missed the application deadline, but a friend pulled some strings and got them a last-minute interview. The interview was a disaster. Paul Graham hated the idea of airbed and breakfast. He famously asked, "People are actually doing this? Why? What's wrong with them?" The founders could feel their chance slipping away. The idea was a dud. The meeting was over. But as they were leaving, Joe Gebbia did something unexpected. He pulled out a box of Obama O's and handed it to Graham.
Joe hands him a box of Obama O's. And Paul Graham thought we just bought this stupid box of cereal. And he's like, no, this is how we funded the company. And Paul Graham said, if you can convince people to pay $40 for $4 box of cereal, maybe you can get strangers to stay in other strangers' homes. And he also liked us because he said we were cockroaches. And he said, it's an investment, nuclear winter, and the only people that will survive are cockroaches, and you're a cockroach. And so I'm like, thank you. It was actually the nicest thing. For like 6 months, that was the only compliment I got.
And so this cockroach-like tenacity got them in. Y Combinator gave them a small seed investment and, more importantly, invaluable advice. And the very first piece of advice Graham gave them was completely counterintuitive for a tech company. He told them to get away from their computers and go meet their users. A piece of advice that would lead to one of their most important and unscalable breakthroughs. Inside Y Combinator, the pressure was on. Their weekly revenue was still flatlined at a pathetic $200. Paul Graham sat down with them, looking at their listings in New York City, their biggest market. As they scrolled through the site, a pattern emerged. The photos were terrible. They were dark, blurry, low-resolution pictures that people took with their phones. They made the apartments look uninviting, even sketchy. The typical Silicon Valley mindset would be to find a scalable, automated solution. Maybe build a photo editing tool into the website or create an AI to rank photos by quality. But Graham's advice was the opposite. He told them to do something that made no sense from a tech perspective. Go to New York, rent a camera, and take the photos yourselves. It was a completely non-scalable idea. Fly across the country to be a free photography service for a handful of your users? It sounded crazy. But they were desperate enough to try anything. Chesky and Gebbia flew to New York. They went door to door, meeting their hosts, talking to them, and taking beautiful, high-resolution, wide-angle photos of their apartments.
And so I went home with Joe, and we borrowed a camera from one of our friends in Brooklyn, who was a photographer, and we knocked on the door. And they're like, hello, yes, I'm here, the photographer. And they're like, wow, this is a small company. The founder's also photographing my home.
A week later, they looked at the numbers. The results were immediate and staggering. The listings with the new professional photos saw 2 to 3 times more bookings. Just by improving the pictures, their weekly revenue doubled from $200 to $400. It was the first real sign of life the company had seen in months. This was the turning point. It taught them a crucial lesson. Sometimes, to build a massive tech company, you have to start by doing things that don't scale at all. This hands-on approach solved one problem. but it created another. They needed more listings, and fast. Their photography trick was great for existing hosts, but how could they get thousands of new ones? Their solution would be just as scrappy and far more controversial. Having found a way to make their listings more appealing, Airbnb now needed to solve the classic chicken and egg problem. They needed guests to attract hosts and hosts to attract guests. So they turned to the biggest marketplace for short-term rentals at the time, Craigslist. They didn't ask for permission. They reverse-engineered Craigslist's platform and figured out how to make their tool fill out the Craigslist posting form automatically.
We built a tool where they could, with a single click of a button, click and distribute their post to Craigslist to get more distribution. And so the listings would get relisted onto Craigslist and they would feed back.
It was a spammy, ethically gray area growth hack. But it worked. It funneled a massive stream of users from the giant of Craigslist directly onto their tiny, fledgling platform. And all for free. People would search for rooms on Craigslist and they would see these beautiful listings with great photos, linking back to an Airbnb profile. It was like putting a Michelin star restaurant's menu inside every fast food joint in the country. But this controversial strategy was the key that unlocked their growth, siphoning away users who were looking for a better, safer, and more user-friendly experience. And it was about to launch them from a scrappy startup into a full-blown global disruptor. With a steady stream of users, they finally had the leverage they needed. In 2009, they officially shortened their name from Airbed and Breakfast to Airbnb. They secured a significant seed funding round of $600,000 from Sequoia Capital, the same firm that had backed Apple and Google. The days of living off credit cards and cereal were over, but their chaotic journey was far from finished. The same aggressive, ask for forgiveness, not permission mindset that defined the Craigslist heist now played out on a global stage. As they expanded into over 190 countries, they ran headfirst into a wall of regulations. Cities like New York, Paris, and their own hometown of San Francisco accused them of running illegal hotel operations, driving up rent prices, and ruining neighborhoods. The company was locked in years of brutal, public legal battles, fighting tooth and nail against city councils and hotel lobbyists. And to survive, they had to evolve. They went from a tech-focused platform to a hospitality company. They introduced a $1 million host guarantee to build trust after a host's apartment was famously trashed. Then, they launched experiences in 2016, allowing locals to offer tours and classes. This embedded Airbnb even deeper in the tourism industry, further tightening their chokehold on it. All this relentless evolution culminated in December 2020, when Airbnb launched one of the largest IPOs of the year, debuting on the Nasdaq at a staggering valuation of $47 billion. Today, Airbnb is an undisputed titan of the travel industry. It boasts over 8 million active listings in more than 100,000 cities worldwide, with a community of over 5 million hosts. Having weathered the storm of the global pandemic, the company has emerged more resilient and profitable than ever, a far cry from the days of measuring weight loss and panic. Its brand identity, centered around the idea of belonging anywhere, reflects a fundamental shift in how people travel, prioritizing authentic, local experiences over the standardized offerings of traditional hotels. Looking back, the birth of Airbnb isn't a clean, linear story of a brilliant idea perfectly executed. It's a testament to surviving chaos. It's a story about two guys who just wanted to make rent and accidentally stumbled upon a billion-dollar idea.